our guest presenting his work is Thomas Seissl. He is a PhD student at the University of Vienna. He is going to talk about one of the most important passages that we commented also in our project in Proteus during our reading group on the Timaeus, so everyone can easily follow the discussion. Thomas worked also on Simplicius and on Aristotle, and he is actually very, very welcome to share with us his previous and more recent work on Plato and Platonism. And of course, after his presentation, there will be time for discussion and for questions, remarks, as usual. So I leave it to you, Thomas. Thank you very much again for accepting our invitation, and very welcome.
Yeah, hello. Thank you so much for giving me the possibility to present my paper and for having me here today. Just a short introduction from my side. My name is Thomas. I'm with the University of Vienna, and actually I'm writing my PhD thesis on the commentary tradition on Aristotle's Now in the physics. And I think there are quite interesting insights in the late ancient commentaries. However, today I will talk about a very famous passage in Plato's Timaeus, which deals with Plato's concept of time. And commonly, if we discuss the concept of time in Plato's Timaeus, the question normally is put forward if we have to take the statement on the generation of the cosmos in Timaeus 28b, to take this statement literally or metaphorically. And this, as you all know, this issue is very old, and this goes back to ancient debates, and is still an open debate today. However, I will not go into this discussion and discuss temporal or atemporal reading of the Timaeus. I will focus on another very famous passage in the Timaeus, namely the passage in 37d, when Plato introduces the notion of time in very general terms. Just to make it clear from the beginning, I have a bit unorthodox strategy in my paper, because I will talk about Plotinus' reading of the passage in the first section, and then I will go on to discuss Simplicius' critical assessment of Plotinus' interpretation. And I think this could be interesting, because I think the modern discussion on the passage reflects on these late ancient debates. So to start with the passage, I'm going to talk about Timaeus 37d, and I will just read this passage out. You can find the text on the handout, and this is text 1a. I go here with the Seissl translation. In this passage, Timaeus says, "And so he, the demiurge, began to think of making a moving image of eternity by bringing order to the heavens too at the same time. He makes an everlasting image of eternity remaining in unity, an image moving according to number. This is, of course, what we have named time." So obviously, Plato deals here with a kind of relationship between an eikon and the paradigm of an eikon. And this is normally put as a relationship of dependence, maybe ontological dependence, and there is maybe the problem that the eikon itself is called here aionion, so everlasting or eternal, and it goes back to Harold Chernis, who complained that this is self-contradicting in this passage, because if the paradigm is eternal, the eikon of it, so something that is ontologically dependent on the paradigm, could not be eternal as well. This normally is solved by saying that the eikon is ontologically dependent, but only in an imperfect way. So the image imitates the paradigm in just an imperfect way. And so the question arises, what is the eikon in question here? And the very traditional interpretation just says the eikon in question here is time, because time is as the passage then would go, time is an imitation of eternity, and it imitates eternity in some way. And the modern debate deals on the question how we can understand this relationship of imitation. So the traditional interpretation says time is an eikon of eternity, but we have two versions here of understanding this imitating relationship. The first version of the interpretation, what I call an essentialist version, says that time is an eikon of eternity, so an imitation of the unity of eternity, as the passage says, by producing regular standard units of time. This is the imitation of eternity's unity. And this is introduced by the passage itself when saying that time moves according to a number which are the temporal units of the movements of the celestial bodies. So this I call an essentialist version. The other version, what I call an accidentalist version, would understand this this imitating relationship a bit differently, because here the generation of the heavens are introduced together with time. So they argue that time could not be just identical to these temporal units, but the imitating quality of time has to be something different. And they say the imitating quality of the eikon is unlimited time. So time is an eikon of eternity by being unlimited duration. Yeah. These two views are very, very dominant in the discussion of this passage, and I think it's clear when we have a closer look at the passages of Plotinus' treatment on eternity and time that this actually just reflects Plotinus' discussion. And so I will go now to Plotinus' reading of the passage. And I think here, just at the beginning of his treatment, which is in Enniads 3:7, we have here exactly this, the view that Plato actually deals with a kind of relationship between time and eternity. You can see this in text 2a on your handout. And Plotinus suggests two ways of grasping this kind of similarity. He says that we can either conceive the eikon by grasping the paradigm and go then to the eikon, or just the other way around. We grasp the eikon and from there we go to understand the paradigm. The reason why Plotinus has to reject the second way, namely to understand the paradigm from the eikon, is that we are here in the realm of the sensible world. He says in the text explicitly, as you can say in the fourth line, we are in the realm of fantasia and not in the intellectual world. And this is the reason why he would reject the second way. And so he has to first investigate the paradigm, which is eternity, and then go on to grasp the eikon. And this is exactly the way he goes in 3.7. And from there, he goes on to argue that when we talk about the measurement of time, also maybe I have to say, first I have to say that this, for Plotinus, is clear that to grasp the essence of time, we have first to determine the essence of eternity. So this is the very question of Plotinus. And then he says that when we, because we have to reject the way of going through the sensible realm and taking this for the very essence of eternity, we have also dismissed the measurable aspect of time. He says this very clear in text 2b on the handout, and I think I will just read this out. So here Plotinus says, Plato, however, said that the substantiality of time was neither measuring nor being measured by something. But in order to make time manifest, the circuit of heavens was taken as a minimum corresponding to the smallest interval of time, so that one could get to grasp from it the quality and quantity of time. But since he wanted to manifest its substantiality, he says that it came to be simultaneously with the heavens, according to eternity as its paradigm, and as an image that is moving, because time too does not stand still, given that the life which it accompanies and runs along with is not still. So here we see very clear again that Plotinus identifies time with the eikon of eternity, and he says that we cannot grasp the essence of time by looking at its qualitative or quantitative aspects. And here in the text, that's interesting to see, he says the hoion kai hoson, and this is very Aristotelian in coinage. Yeah. And I think he has also a good reason for saying that, as we then can see in the next text on your handout. Yeah. But I think Plotinus sees also here that there is a difficulty arising with Plato's text, because Plato explicitly talks about the movements of the heavens at the same time with the generation of time. And he dismisses explicitly this reading, which I called an essentialist reading. There he says, this is text 2c in your handout, but if someone says that Plato says that the motion of the stars too are times, he should recall that he says that these things came into being as a manifestation and determination of time, and to be a visible measure. For since it was not possible for soul to determine time itself, or for people to measure by themselves each part of it, as it was invisible and could not be grasped, and especially because they did not know how to count, the demiurge makes day and night by means of which it was possible to understand two from their difference, and from there, he says, arose the conception of number. So he here gives some evidence that he would reject an essentialist version, as I I called it, because here again he says that the measurable aspect of time is just an accidental aspect of time and not time itself. And it's interesting to see also here that he frames the original notion of number in Plato's text. Plato says ἀριθμός. Plotinus frames this ἀριθμός in terms of measure, metron, and measuring, metring. And here he is in line with the essentialist version of the modern debate, because the essentialist version again would also frame Plato's notion of number in terms of a measure. But he rejects the essentialist version because he would say that the essentialist version mix up the essence with the accident of time. Okay, so this is, I think we can see here with this text very clear these two options, and Plotinus obviously goes to the third. And he argues also why we should reject an essentialist version of the text. But then I have to say that in the modern debate there is a third option to go, actually, which I did not mention in the beginning of my presentation. The third option goes back to Rémi Brague's interpretation of this passage, and he says that Plato, when he talks about time in this passage, actually did not mean that time is an image, but rather is a number. When we look back here at text 1a on the handout, he has just a very syntactical and very philological argument for his reading, because he says that the demonstrative pronoun touton in the very end of this passage does not refer to the eikona before, but to the ἀριθμόν. Actually, he says that we have three candidates and we have to choose which the touton, so the identifying demonstrative, refers to time. He says it could be either uranon, ἀριθμόν, or eikona. And he has some philological reasons why he chooses ἀριθμόν. So just in a few words, Brague reads the passage as Plato claimed that time is identified with number. I will not go into this discussion here at this point. I don't want to revalue Brague's argument. I will just ask a hypothetical question. The question is, if Brague's reading was right, it would be very hard to imagine that he was the first one who sees that actually Plato did not mean that time is an image, but rather time is a number. And I would say that he was not the first one, because we have some evidence in the commentary tradition, namely in Simplicius, that he puts it quite the same way as Brague's understanding. And so I will go on with some passages of Simplicius' commentaries and reacting to Plotinus' reading of the passage. The first text I want to discuss is Simplicius' commentary on Aristotle's categories. This is text 3a on your handout. And there he explains why he would reject Plotinus' reading. I read this passage out. There Simplicius says, now in his Plotinus remarks on time, he represents it, time, not as a measure, but rather as what is measured. But whether he represents it as a measure or what is measured, given that it is distinct from measuring and being measured, it will possess measuring and being measured accidentally. Hence, just as what is measured by a cubit rule is not said to be what it itself is. And if someone defines movement as what is measured by something, he does not say, well, this movement itself is. So also someone mentioning a measure or a measured thing does not mention time, but if anything, a particular accident of time. If, on the other hand, Plotinus, like Plato, says that time, is a moving image of eternity, then he does away with its being a relative. For then, even if measuring and being measured belong to it by virtue of a relation, they belong to it not as something which is a relation, but as something else subsisting before that relation. So Plotinus says that time cannot be characterized per se and as a relative to in this way. So much against Plotinus. This argument as it stands is not really clear, maybe, but I will try to make a bit sense of it. I take it that Simplicius' point here is that on what he actually agrees with Plotinus, that the measurable aspect of time is a characterization per accidens. And this is totally fine. You can say that the measurable aspect of time is an accidental aspect of time. As he makes this clear with the example, when you measure something by a cubit rule, so if we say that Socrates is 4 cubits tall, we wouldn't know what Socrates is in its very essence, namely he is a human being. And so when we say that Socrates is 4 cubits tall, we would not say anything about its essence. So on this point, I think Simplicius is in agreement with Plotinus. The problem is, as I take it from this passage, is that he would say that Plotinus argues as if the essence of time would be something very different from its accidental aspect. So when he says that they belong to it not as something which is a relation, but as something else existing before that relation, I think this is critical with Plotinus' argument that he accepts 2 temporal orders, namely the 2 temporal orders would be something existing before the relation of being measured. And Plotinus explicitly accepts this possibility of 2 time orders. And I think Simplicius is critical about it, because if we accept a possibility of these 2 time orders, we would also say that we can speak about time and grasp time independently of its being an accident. I think Simplicius' point is just, if we make a distinction between per se and per accidens, we speak about one and the same thing, but just in different respects. We do not speak about different things. When we speak about the tallness of Socrates, we are talking about Socrates and not something else. And I think this is just a very conceptual or a critique relating to the conceptual framework of Plotinus' position. So if we characterize time per se and per accidens, we are characterizing it one and the same thing, one and the same thing in different respects, but at every moment. I think this is the interesting point here. And then we shall ask if this position is fine. What would he say? What is the very essence of time? And I think Simplicius has another interesting point here. I will go to text 3b now on your handout, and we'll start with the reading just in the middle of the text. There he says in his commentary on Aristotle's physics, he says that the eternal image proceeding in accordance with numbers. So this is just the quotation from the Timaeus. Finally, is nothing other than time subsisting in accordance with number that is neither paradigmatic number nor number consisting of units, but that which is something image-like, considered according to the order of motion, i.e. the before and after. For the number belonging to the moving qua moving has at different times a different before and after, and both introduces it and determines it in regard to order. Aristotle saw this well, and interpreting it in a clearer way, called time the number of motion in respect of before and after. So if in accordance with number expresses in regard to order, it expresses nothing different from in respect of before and after, for this is the ordinal number, just as the abstract is 1, 2, 3. I take this quote to say that what Plato claimed in the passage under discussion, what he identified with time is not the image, but the number, as he says, that the core concept of this is number. And so the question is, what is the understanding of a number here on the interpretation of Simplicius? And Simplicius is clear when he says that we have to understand number in the sense of order. So when here we say that it moves according to number, this means ordinal number in Simplicius interpretation. And so I claim that Simplicius has some reason to reject the essentialist version of the traditional interpretation, as I call it, because when he says that time is characterized, time in its very essence is characterized by ordinal number, he claims some kind of successiveness or orderliness of number. As you can see here on this very schematic illustration on the handout, there is a difference between an ordinal number and just the regular replicability of temporal units. The difference is that time per se, as I called it in Simplicius' interpretation, is by its very definition not symmetric but asymmetric. So this kind of characterization of time by ordinal numbers is directed. What is not true for time characterized by temporal units. And this maybe the interesting outcome from this interpretation we can see here is that, in my view, Simplicius can reasonably claim that he can bridge the two versions of the traditional interpretation. When we go back to the two versions, we see that the two versions of the traditional interpretation claim two things which are very intuitive for our concept of time, I would say. The essentialist version would claim that we can measure time, and we can measure time all the time. And Simplicius would say, yeah, this is right. We can measure time by its accidental aspect, because time is measurable all the time against Plotinus. But he would also say, and this is very in line with an accidentalist version of the traditional interpretation, he would also say that it is an essential aspect of time of being successive or being directed. And he claims this by saying that time is characterized by ordinal numbers. And so I think he has good ground to bridge these two versions, which are here very in opposite. Then last but not least, the question remains again, when Plato speaks here about an eikon of eternity, we have to ask, so what could be the eikon in question then, if time not? What is the eikon? And there is an interesting passage when Simplicius comments on Aristotle's De Caelo. And in his commentary on De Caelo, Aristotle is putting forward a prominent argument, maybe an argument directly opposed to the Timaeus, when he says that the cosmos cannot be generated because generation implies contrary movements, and as we see, the movement of the heavens are not contrary-wise, because they're moving always the same way, because they're moving around. And Simplicius, in his comment on this famous passage in Aristotle, here says the following. I cite here text 3c on the handout. Of such a kind did the much-honored heaven first appear to us in its corporeal nature, emerging into being after the intelligible ordering as the finest images representing the best of paradigms. For after proceeding from unity and sameness into similarity with respect to what is, what was generated came to be an image, insofar as it already resembled, but was not actually connected to what is. Just a short point about this last passage. I think the interesting thing is here that Plotinus did not identify time with the image of eternity, what the traditional interpretation and Plotinus would do, but he identifies the image with the heavens, so Uranos. And the reason for this is that the eikon, so the Uranos as an eikon, can be a kind of a hint for the cosmos cause, which is a stable cause, being self-identical, so belongs to the realm of being and not to the realm of becoming. And Uranos can be an image of this stable cause, as it is right to say that the Uranos is moving and is changing in a certain sense, but it is also changing and moving in a very stable way. And so the Uranos is an eikon of this eternal cause. And so Simplicius' reading of the passage is in line with the alternative reading suggested by Brague as well, but actually, this is not Brague's invention, as I would claim, but goes back to ancient debates. Yeah, maybe to come to an end and to come to the discussion. Another interesting point is that as a result of Simplicius' interpretation, Simplicius would also reject the interpretation that Plato actually deals here with a relationship of similarity between time and eternity. As time was identified with number, it is not the other element of the relationship, but the other element of the relationship is the eikon, which is Uranos in Simplicius' reading. And so it is not, the result would be that Plato here does not deal with the relationship between time and eternity as it traditionally was read until the present day, but it is rather dealing with the relationship between the cosmos and the generated realm of the cosmos. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. So, Thomas, thank you. I now kindly ask the participants to raise their hands in order to ask questions. Of course, I can see that Michele Sandrelli is online, and of course, since he has to leave at 4, I'll give priority to him if he has to leave. No, nobody has questions. That's kindly okay. Victor, yes, Victor, please.
Okay. Thank you for your talk. It was very stimulating, although also very rich. So it's kind of difficult to pick out an exact venue of criticism or opinion. So this is to say that I have many questions to ask, but maybe the best thing is to start with one clarificatory question, which is whether I got it right. Did you say that Plotinus used to equate the image of the eternity mentioned in the Timaeus with the Uranus or the motions of the sphere, or did I get that one wrong?
No, sorry. He does explicitly reject this view. So
okay, yes.
It's just an accidental aspect.
Yes, of course. Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah.
Okay.
So, all right. Now, let me see. Another very brief clarificatory. So you are actually upholding or arguing for this position that time in the given passage could or should be identified with number, right?
Yeah, maybe I have to be a bit more modest. I would say it's an interesting alternative reading of this passage. And I think it can avoid some difficulties the traditional interpretation deals with. I think this is my claim.
Okay. So
and
yes.
Sorry,
thank you.
if I can add here something, because I was not very clear in my presentation. I think the interesting point is that the interpretation of this passage, and this is, I think, quite present in modern versions of the text, and the modern interpretation deals with the question: is it an essential feature of time being measurable, or is it just an accidental measure? And this distinction actually is not Platonic at all. It was introduced by Plotinus' reading of the passage, and this is very Aristotelian. This is not in the Platonic text. And I think just one interesting point of Simplicius' discussion of Plotinus' interpretation is to say that when Plotinus introduces this distinction of per se and per accidens characterization, he misconceived this distinction, because in this way the distinction does not work.
I see. All right. So yes. Well, this I'm sorry that we have to do this online and we don't have more time for discussion, but I feel prompted to steal a bit more of your time. So as far as Brague's interpretation is concerned, of course, the demonstrative two-tone is I mean, very strong, so to say, lexical argument in favor of this reading. And I also think that Seissl and Johansen in their translations go back to the, because you cannot really avoid it unless you take this kind of identification to be derivative, in the sense that time can be equated with number only as being measurable. And I was actually very much bothered by this, and would even not reject the possibility of kind of corruption of the text with this demonstrative, because it goes very much against the both traditional interpretation and what I believe that this is the sense of the passage. Now, I would like to point out, actually ask one thing which might be relevant for your talk and further development. So I haven't read Simplicius on this, I have to admit that. But from what we heard today, it seems to me that what Simplicius is trying to illuminate is the phrase in accordance with number. What does it mean for time to move in accordance with number? Which needn't or doesn't mean that he tries to interpret time as number. This is not at all obvious. And I would also like to, this is the last time, thank you very much for your patience, or the last thing, thank you very much for your patience. I think there is independent evidence in the text that time should be equated with the image of eternity and not with number. And these are passages 38a 7-8 and 38b 9 c3, where again time is said to be an image of eternity explicitly. So this is yes. Thank you. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Maybe I can just briefly react to your comment. I think if you identify time with a number, you can do so also by going with what I called an essentialist version of the traditional interpretation, because this interpretation also it would claim that time is identical with this image, and saying that this image is a kind of number, and they read this notion of number in terms of the measurable aspect. So you do not have to accept Braque's and Simplicius' reading, maybe, to say that time has a numerical aspect.
Yeah.
Because you can just say it along with the essentialist version. But so then the interesting question would be, what is number here exactly? I think this is not very clear, and this is not only interesting for exactly this passage, this is interesting for the Timaeus as a whole, I would say. What is the role of number or proportionality or something like this in the Timaeus and in his characterization of the cosmos? And what I think one interesting question could be, what is the ontological status of numbers in this Platonic picture? And I would not say that this has, or this is maybe a modified version of what we shall call a traditional Platonic picture of numbers. I do not really think that numbers have a strong ontological status in Timaeus' speech, in the sense of being something or being a form for something. I think they have really instrumental. This is an instrumental feature of characterizing the cosmos, and I think, sorry, I have to add this. I think this also goes back to Plotinus' interpretation, because he stresses the point that to read this ἀριθμός in the sense of measure. And why he does this? I think he strictly wants to avoid any similarity to Aristotle. I think this is the reason. He has, maybe, to be fair, he has a systematic reason as well. To read ἀριθμός in the sense of measure, he claims that this actually has to mean measure here, because a motion is continuous, and ἀριθμός in the sense of just a discrete number is not continuous, but a measure is. This is a systematic reason. But the ideological reason, maybe you could say this, the ideological reason would be to remove Aristotle from this picture.
Thank you very much. And so now I have Danielle in the queue.
Okay, thank you, Thomas. This is a really interesting paper. I really enjoy it, and I really like it. And I guess I have a couple of questions, but first I wanted to ask you, so I can get a clearer picture of what you did at the end. So is it that your proposal is that to use Simplicius to, you said something like bridge the gap between version 1 and version 2, right? Could you just run again that thought? Because I think it escaped me a little bit.
Yeah, thank you so much for this question, because I wanted to add exactly this point right now, because I think the two versions as they appear, the two versions of the modern interpretation, they seem to that they suggest that we can have two different conceptions of number, namely number in the sense of the essentialist version of just the regularity and replicability of temporal units, and number in the sense of successiveness or directedness, as Simplicius says also. And I think we have some reason that Plato, in his notion of number ἀριθμός, I think he just these two concepts of number, they are not opposed to each other. I think more and more, if I think about it, I think that Plato's picture actually is time, if it is a number, or if number plays a role in this concept, then it is a number which is regular and directed at the same time. There is no opposition between these two concepts of number. And I think, yeah, I think Simplicius' interpretation can give some hint to this interpretation.
Right. Okay. So, but that last move in the paper is your own, right? So it's not that Simplicius says this. Is you using Simplicius to right. Make that move?
Exactly.
Okay. So that's an interesting argument, and I guess I would suggest you to make more clear that that's your contribution
Okay.
there. But beyond that, I guess I have a question that it's not explicitly about your argument, but I'm wondering what you think about it. So how do you think about this in relation to the claim to the idea that time is created or eternal, or well, created or ungenerated, and how those two interpretations kind of divide also the interpreters.
Yeah, that's interesting, because the common ground of the commentators was just the cosmos is eternal. There is no discussion, with the exception of John Philoporos. But the other commentators, I think there was no discussion. Interestingly, this question, if the cosmos is generated in time or not, did not play any role in this discussion of the concept of time. This is very interesting. This also plays no real this does not play any role in the controversy between Simplicius and John Philoponos. They agree that Aristotle was right in his definition of time because it was just a Platonic definition. That's just but they did not agree that the definition of time in Aristotle is right. Although they did not agree on the question whether the cosmos was generating time or not. That's interesting. And what it does with my interpretation, yeah, I'm not really sure. Actually, I'm not sure. I would say maybe that if it was reasonable to identify time with number, I think the question would not be so strongly put forward to ask if this number was generated or not. I think this is not just not the central question. While if we identify time with image, this question would come up more strongly, and then because then all the questions would arise with what is this ontological status of image, and was this image generated or not, and so I think the just the focus is another, I would say. But I do not have a real answer to your question.
Thank you. I guess so I have a couple of other comments perhaps, but I want to give room for anyone else who wants to ask.
At present, there is nobody in the list who raised their hands. I have a remark question, but perhaps if nobody is there, you can continue, Danielle, and then I will ask my question.
Go ahead, Sylvia.
No, well, it's way in which I would like to push further the discussion, assuming that I'm not convinced, of course, that we should equate time with number. However, certainly ἀριθμός plays a fundamental role in the passage that you commented. And if you go to what you label with 8.2 interpretation, so the accidentalist version, exactly. In the very last part of this section, you report, so Plato in fact distinguished between the reversible temporal succession, was, is, will be, and the uniform and measurable time flow of limited temporal units. I found it correct. The latter were introduced by the demure in order to make the nature of the former more intelligible. Time as an eikon of eternity, in its very nature, is unlimited duration. Now, one can disagree with the idea that we should equate time and number. However, it's undeniable that in order to define, or in order to talk about the properties of time in the passage in 37d, we have to consider that ἀριθμός, so it's in its profound meaning, it refers to the unlimited. So it's the negation or the subtraction of rizzo, no? of the limit. So it's unlimited. And in this sense, even if we don't equate time and number, and we stick, let's say, to very literal translation, we can say that time moves or proceeds according to the unlimited. So I would like you to maybe add more on this possible reading of the text. I would like to know whether you thought about already about this philological remark regarding the katharithmon expression and so on.
Yeah, thank you so much. Actually, it was not that clear for me, but that's a really interesting point. So I think one interesting question in this context could be whether this unlimitedness is open in one direction or in two. I think, and some proponents of the essentialist version, so this is A1 on the handout, they even say that when we understand time just as the regularity of temporal units, the direction of time is open in both directions. And the second version would claim that this is actually the error of time by successiveness, was, is, will be. And so if you stress the quality of time as an ἀριθμός, so something negated of limitedness, the question would be in what direction, I would say, it is unlimited. And what you also pointed out, actually, this distinction between the what I quoted here, the irreversible temporal succession and the uniform and measurable time flow. This distinction actually goes back to Phlastos, and because I do not cite Phlastos here, but because Phlastos actually has an interesting middle position between these two versions, because he would claim, as I understand him, he would say that Plato has in mind a kind of free cosmic chaos, which is already temporal, but without being ordered by temporal units. And exactly this unit was put into existence by the demiurge ordering of the heavens. And this ordering is the eikon of eternity. So actually he has an interesting intermediate position between the two versions. What results from this, and interestingly, Vlastos' reading is in line with Plotinus' interpretation as well, because they would say, I think, that there are two time orders. So the limited time and the unlimited. And this is at least in the terms of Plotinus' characterization as per se and per accidens problematic, I would say.
Okay, thank you very much, Thomas. I would leave it to Danielle because there is nobody else that raised their hands.
Okay, so I guess I was going to ask you about the initial distinction between this version 2 and version 1 and version 2, and I guess so. You said it's kind of Plotinus' invention or something like that. But I was wondering whether you are endorsing it, and because I kind of feel that it's a little bit problematic. So I'm kind of hesitant to go with it as a distinction of the interpretations. But I'm trying to articulate the reason why, and I'm kind of not sure. I guess the per accidens is the part, or the part that I'm not completely sure whether time could be distinguished in that way, or would it be the same to say that time has some primary and secondary aspects? But because if it's not the same thing, so you might think that there are essential characteristics, but it's just that the designer chooses one as the main thing to relate to something else or to whatever, right? But it's not that the other aspects are accidental in a strong sense, at least. So I guess yeah, to kind of to rephrase that, I'm not sure the distinction per se per accidens makes sense when asking about time. But perhaps what I'm trying to say is that at the end, I'm closer to your end point than anything else. But I still feel uncomfortable distinguishing the debate or splitting the debate in this way.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much. I would agree, because the underlying distinction is problematic at all. Because one reason for thinking this is that, as Plotinus says himself, that then we have to speak about an ousia of time, and what can it be? And for Plotinus, it would be the life of the soul. And I think he reads Plato in the same manner, that life, the living soul, would be the ousia of time. But I think, yeah, this is problematic from the start point, because you have to accept something like an ousia of time, and you have to accept that Plato thinks the same way, that there is an ousia of time.
Right. I guess my kind of follow up on that is that then I'm worried that you run into problems by kind of adding to your list contemporary interpreters, because I'm not sure they would agree to those terms. So I'm thinking about More or so, like Sadler or Ursula Koppe. I'm not sure they will. They would kind of accept those terms. Now, having said that, I do see that at least in how More distinguishes the different senses of measurable and time and all that, he's kind of close to something like that. But I guess you will need to do some work to convince me that it's kind of the same thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I see your point, I think, and thank you for this hint. Yeah, maybe I can just say this, that it's just an interesting point from the view of the reception that Plotinus uses a very Aristotelian distinction to explain his position on Plato. This might seem odd. He in one passage, I think I have not cited this passage on the handout, but in one passage he uses the term katasymbiokos in this discussion, and this is interesting, I would say. Why he does this, I'm also not really sure, and you, in the end, you can say, sorry, this is not in the Platonic text, this distinction. Yeah. And I'm not really sure if the distinction in the Platonic text makes this much sense. Yeah.
So I don't know whether Daniel has other points to raise, but now I have also Eduardo and Victor that want to comment. So Daniel, do you have other questions? Okay, thank you. Then Eduardo, please go ahead.
Thank you, Thomas. Would you mind going back to your first text, please?
Yeah, this text, you mean?
Yes, yeah. Exactly. I have what is perhaps a naive question. If I understood you correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, your solution to the puzzlement caused by the traditional interpretation is to read with Simplicius touton as referring to ἀριθμόν. Is that?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. My naive question is, would touton be the right demonstrative pronoun to use? I mean, the idea is, if Plato wanted to refer back to ἀριθμόν, he might have wanted to say that more explicitly.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Either with ekenos or even with a adverbial demonstrative, because again, it's kata ἀριθμόν, not just ἀριθμός. So that is a question that perhaps may be more for Plato or also for you, but yes, that's a concern that I have.
Yeah, thanks. And to be fair, Braque suggests, as I said, these three candidates. He says that the text is not that clear as he then claims, maybe. and we have these three candidates of reference, namely uranon, ἀριθμόν, and εἰκόνα. And I think you're absolutely right that if it should be this kind of reference, referring back to ἀριθμόν, you would expect something more explicit. I think you're right. But actually, Braque gives some independent arguments. So as I understand Braque's argument, he gives some more evidence for that time is identified with number. And I think one interesting point maybe is that he says that the kineton in the first line is not in agreement with the echo. This is the first point. So this is something different, and he suggests saying something like, "This is we have to read this in as an apposition." So he says the demiurge began to think of making an image or something movable as an image or something like this. So this is the first point. The next point would be that he has a quite different interpretation of the Ionion, because he says, and I think this is maybe the most interesting point also for a modern discussion, because I think it's quite accepted to read this Ionion just as eternal or everlasting or something like this. And he stresses the point that this Ionion actually means something, an adjective as from ion, and this ion implies something of eternal life or life circle or regularity of life or something like this. And I think the argument goes that this Ionion would not make any sense, or would make much more sense if it refers to uranon, which is quite accepted to be a kind of living and moving thing, and not to number or I think.
So,
and sorry, just a quick remark. When we speak about the text, it's also very interesting, just on the textual level, that Plato switches the tenses here. Then because the sentence starts that he thought to make or something like this, and then he goes on, poie, he makes. I'm not really sure what to think about this. Because when Plato speaks about time and the generation of time and the generation of the heavens and so on, at other passages, he mostly uses perfect tense or the aorist, but not in this passage. I'm not really sure why. I would be interested what you say about this.
I don't, off the top of my head, I do not have anything to reply to that observation. Sorry. But I think I'll have a look at Brague just to have things a bit clearer as well. Thank you.
Thanks.
So now I cannot see Victor with his hand raised, but Victor, do you want to say something?
No, I changed my mind. I'm sorry. I don't want to take more time.
And Danielle? You have your hand raised, that's why I'm asking you. Okay.
No, I think I just left it like that.
Okay.
I forget that in this thing you have to put it down.
I think anyway that I mean, as a general remark, I mean, this is one of the most commented passages in the history of philosophy. And so you, Thomas, yeah, you have been very brave in deciding to commenting on it, and I think that we can continue the discussion in our next sessions, in the sense that Plato will be always with us during this academic year. So I would like to thank you again very much. I invite the other people also to
Thank you.
clap their hands, and I would like to remind you all that we will be having another session before Christmas on the 15th of December. And I think that we can thank our speaker again. We will reconvene in 2 weeks' time for our last session before Christmas. Thank you very much again, Thomas. Thank you all
so
for
much.
yeah.
Goodbye.
Thank you very much. Very nice paper.
Thank you.
Bye bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.